अस्सलाम वालेकुम गाइस, वेलकम बैक टू द चैनल, वेलकम बैक टू आवर न्यू व्लॉग। अगर आप लोगों ने हमारा चैनल सब्सक्राइब नहीं किया तो सब्सक्राइब करें और हमारा इंस्टाग्राम भी फॉलो करें, बिकॉज अभी हम बल्कि इवन कि हम टिकटॉक पे भी दोबारा से हमने रीस्टार्ट किया और हम लोग एक्टिव हैं इंस्टाग्राम पे और टिकटॉक पे, यूट्यूब पे दोबारा से हमने चीज़ें स्टार्ट की हैं। सो अभी ये जो व्लॉग है इसके बारे में थोड़ा सा बता दूं कि आपने लास्ट हमारे LS बिल्ड में देखा होगा कि हमारा जो हमने गाड़ी स्टार्ट कर ली थी, लेकिन हमें कुछ प्रॉब्लम्स आ गए, बड़े सीवियर प्रॉब्लम्स आए जिसमें सो गाइस हमने जो बोर कराया पाकिस्तान में, वो ओवर साइज पिस्टन की वजह से जो बोर हुआ उसमें थोड़ा सा फर्क आ गया स्लीव्स में। उसकी वजह से ऑयल जो है वो ऊपर फेंक रही थी और गाड़ी जो है वो चलाने के काबिल नहीं थी, तो वो फिर हमारा जो ब्लॉक है वो बेसिकली ज़ाया हो गया। क्योंकि मैं नहीं समझता पाकिस्तान में उस तरह के बोर क्वालिटी है, क्योंकि जो LS इंजन होता है उसमें 3 डायमेंशनल बोर होता है, और अगर आप इनलाइन 6 है जैसे 2JZ होता है उसमें तो स्ट्रेट बोर हो जाता है। मेरा ख्याल है पाकिस्तान में इजीली वो हो सकता है, बट V8 को करना थोड़ा सा मुश्किल है। सो खैर हमने ये जो प्रॉब्लम फेस की उसके बाद हमने डिस्कस किया दुबई में जो मेरा दोस्त है नासिर अल हरबाली, मैं उसका लिंक भी देता हूँ, आप लोग चेक करें उसकी प्रोफाइल। और हमने उससे मशवरा किया कि हम क्या करें, तो उसने हमें मशवरा दिया कि रेदर देन हम एक और ब्लॉक लेके फिर वही बोर कराने जाए, उसने बोला इससे बेहतर है कि स्टॉक ब्लॉक लेते हैं, स्टॉक पिस्टन यूज़ करते हैं। अगर हम ओवर साइज पिस्टन ब्लॉक चेंज भी करते हैं तो उसमें ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा भी 25-30 हॉर्स पावर का गेन है, तो उसका मेरा ख्याल है उसके लिए एक्स्ट्रा 20,000 दिरहम खर्च करने की ज़रूरत नहीं है। तो उसने हमें मशवरा दिया, हमने उसको फॉलो किया, हमने स्टॉक जो है वो ब्लॉक लिया, वो भी नासिर ने खुद लिया, पिस्टन वगैरह हर चीज़ चेक करके हमने यहाँ से बाकी का इंजन जो था, जो हेड्स थे और जो चीज़ें थी बाकी रेलिवेंट, वो हमने सारी दुबई भेज दी। उसने हमारा इंजन दोबारा से उसको बिल्ड किया और हमने स्टॉक ब्लॉक यूज़ करने के बाद उसने पैक करके रख दिया। उसने हमें गो एड दिया कि हमारी तरफ से रेडी है, आप मंगवा लो। तो जब मीनवाइल हम पाकिस्तान मंगा रहे थे तो हमने नासिर से ही रिक्वेस्ट की कि नासिर तुम पाकिस्तान आ जाओ और ये इंजन बिल्ड करने में हमारी मदद करो, क्योंकि ऑब्वियसली नासिर का एक्सपीरियंस बहुत ज़्यादा है V8 इंजन में और 350Z में। तो मैंने सोचा कि बजाय इसके कि हम पाकिस्तान में मज़ीद अभी और ट्राई करें और एक्सपीरियंस करें और चीज़ें ख़राब करें, टाइम ज़ाया करें, तो हमने ये डिसाइड किया कि हम नासिर को बुलाते हैं और इस चीज़ को फर्दर आगे बढ़ाते हैं। तो खैर नासिर से हमारा टाइप हुआ, सामान आ गया, नासिर आ गया और अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह अब नासिर आगे मैं आपको इस व्लॉग में दिखाता हूँ नासिर का क्या इनपुट है इस बारे में। और नासिर से हमें बहुत कुछ सीखने को मिल रहा है, सो लिहाजा आप देखें तो चेक करें वीडियो।
ऑलराइट गाइस, आप देख रहे हैं हम लोग काम करें और बहुत ज़्यादा हमारा टाइम डिले आया है। वो मैंने आपको पीछे बताया था कि उसके पीछे क्या रीज़न था, लेकिन अभी हमारे पास एक सरप्राइज़ एंट्री है। हमारा एक दोस्त है, इंटरनेशनल चैम्पियन है। हम पहले तो उसका शुक्रिया अदा करते हैं, वो हमारे आया, पाकिस्तान ज्वाइन किया और मेरे ड्रिफ्ट जी बिल्ड में वो मेरे लिए हेल्पफुल है बहुत ज़्यादा। वो पूरा का पूरा एंटायर प्रोजेक्ट वो अपने सामने खुद कर रहा है और हम उसके साथ बल्कि नई चीज़ें सीख रहे हैं। सो स्टे ट्यून, आगे देखते हैं। आप लोगों को मैं उससे मिलवाता भी हूँ आगे व्लॉग में, तो आप मिलें और आपको पता चलेगा वो कौन है।
Hey Pakistan, so I just got here to Karachi at Adeel's place, friend of mine. Got to meet him in UAE in the drift scene, and he wants to bring the drift scene to you guys here. So hopefully I'll be good knowledge for you guys. What we're doing is very simple and straightforward. I guess it's not common over here. But anyway, so the plan is, I've been speaking about this with Adeel for the past, like, I don't know, like 7-8 months since my season started, which is all of winter. And the plan is very simple. So Adeel has a 350Z over here. I also run a 350Z chassis back in UAE. So the plan is that we're going to swap in a very basic LS engine, nothing complicated, a reliable setup, a stock bottom end with PRC heads and a cam and a good flowing intake. So I built the engine back in UAE. I wouldn't say built because it's a stock bottom end, but we put together a package which I know is going to be reliable if the proper maintenance is done. So we're going to put that in the car. We're going to set up his transmission, a TR6060, which is out of a late model Camaro SS. So it's something between 2010 and 2014-ish, 15th. And we're going to put that into the car with a nice tilt-in clutch. And then we're going to do all the essentials that turns the car from a basic let's say, missile drift car into a pro car. So we try to put all the weight in the rear. So we're going to do a rear-mounted radiator setup, a proper fuel system with a surge, with an in-tank surge system, so that we never run into low fuel situations. And to control the oil, instead of going with an aquasump, which I believe is unnecessary for something like 7,000 RPM, we're going to run what I love running on all my cars, even on my almost 1,000 horsepower drift car back home, which is an aquasump. I'll explain later a bit more what an aquasump system is, but for you nerds out there that know what I'm talking about, it's your budget-friendly dry sump. And at the same time, it does the job and it's reliable. So we're going to be doing all of that. Once we're done with the mechanical side, we're going to jump onto the tuning side to what makes a drift car that extra little bit better than the competition, which is a proper setup suspension. Obviously, the magic is tires. I always say tires are 80%. Suspension setup is anywhere between 20%. But when you're looking for that 100%, you want to go with 80% of the tires and the 20% on the setup. It's what makes an average driver a better driver.
Okay. Removes all the dirt and then it comes out. Okay. In a normal car, it just goes straight back into the engine over here. Okay, this is a normal car. Now in our case, first of all, we have an oil cooler. So it will come out from here, go to the oil cooler, in, and then out again. And then it's going to go back to the engine. The addition that we're doing in your car is it will come to this valve over here. So over here, there's a check valve. You see there's an arrow. Okay. The oil only travels in that direction. Okay. It does not come the opposite way. Okay. So now the engine, the oil goes through the T fitting. Okay. It continues on back into the engine and up to into your internals. Okay. We are adding this T right here. So this now goes up to the back to the aquasump tank. Okay, so what's the job of the aquasump? Before it goes to the aquasump tank, it comes, so let's say it's like this in the car. It comes to this valve. This, you will control it from inside, okay? So this is closed and this is open, okay? So it goes to the aquasump. When you turn on the car, the oil goes into the tank, okay? It fills it up, it pressurizes the tank. Okay. So let's say your engine has like 60 PSI of oil pressure, okay? And you're on wide open throttle at like 7,000 RPM, you have like 95 PSI oil pressure, okay? It's the same concept as a dry sump. The dry sump, basically, you have a tank outside fed by gravity that is always feeding the engine. So it doesn't matter what G-force you have, the engine will always have supply of oil. But that system costs like 15, 16, 18,000 usually, while this one costs like 3,000, 4,000, you know? So this check valve, the reason why you need to open it is you have to understand the main time that bearings are damaged from lack of oil is when you come and you started the first time. So for example, the car is parked for 2 days, you come, there is no oil in the system at all. So that first 20, 30 seconds, the pump is still picking up the oil, sending it through all of this back into the engine. But what an aquasump gives you the luxury of is that you can prime the engine with oil before you start. So when you start, you'll even later when we do it, you'll even hear the noise of the engine when you start it after you open the aquasump. It's smooth. Just like when you start a car after it's been driven for like an hour, you switch it off and then you start it direct. The engine is smooth. But in the morning, the first 20, 30 seconds, the engine sounds rough because there's no oil. But this will, what basically we'll do, we'll start the car, we'll crank it so the oil goes into all the system. Once we get oil pressure in the system, once we see on the dash that we have oil pressure, then we start the car. Then we slowly open this to fill up the aquasump with oil. When the aquasump reaches the same oil pressure as your engine, we shut it off. And then when you start, you'll have no bearing issues. Okay? When you're drifting, you will keep this always on. Okay, you'll keep it on. For example, if there is no G-force happening, like on the dyno, while you're drifting, you keep it on. Okay.
And if we drive straight,
there's no advantage of it. It's like it's not there. Okay. Now, the thing you need to understand is don't get worried about it. If it's not on, it's like any street car. If you leave it off, it's like any normal street car. But any normal street car, if you take it to drifting, it will starve from the oil because the oil will move away from the pickup.
Yeah.
Okay, and also you have to understand, these engines with these oil pans are designed for street use. So in street use, you're not on 6,000, 5,000 RPM for like 20, 30 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
What happens is the oil pump takes out the oil from the oil pan faster than it returns.
Okay.
You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you're picking up the oil and putting it into the engine, that oil inside the engine is rotating. Oil, when you throw it on anything, on the wall, it sticks and then it slowly goes down, like honey.
Yes.
So the oil does not return into the oil pan very fast. So that's why when you're drifting, also you have to have logic. Do not continue drifting more than 40, 50 seconds. You need to slow down, relax. Not only, maybe the temperatures are good because right now what we're doing with this water system going to the back and stuff, your cooling will be very good. Even your oil temperatures will be very good.
Okay.
But that does not mean that you have adequate oil in the engine. The first symptom for a bad engine is high oil temperature because that means there's friction happening.
Okay.
And obviously you have to change the oil regularly. I usually prefer that every event you change the oil.
Okay.
It's cheap insurance to save your engine, especially if you're not being able to get very good quality oil, then change it every event. Even if you drain it, because for example, my mechanic, he always gives me a headache. Every time he drains the oil is still new. Just change it.
Okay.
It doesn't matter because the oil might look new. But what happens is, like the cooking oil that you're using at home, when you put it the first time and you cook with it, it reaches a boiling temperature of 120, 130, whatever. When it cools down, the viscosity is not the same anymore. It's less.
Yes.
And the same thing with engine oil. After you heat it up for a long cycle, it loses that viscosity. So it might look fine, but once you get it up to temperature, it will not work as good as the first time.
Okay.
Okay, so it's cheap insurance to keep your engine safe.
Okay.
The whole point of this is that you are opening a valve that will cover for short periods whenever your engine starves from oil. If you visually like how the tank looks, I can put it close to you, but it, like personally for me, it doesn't look nice. So what I will do is I will mount only this next to your shifter, just like in my car.
Yeah.
If you saw on my car, it's right here. I open it and I close it. It's very simple.
Yes.
The thing that your mechanic has to understand, because he can fuck your engine if you don't follow this.
Yeah.
You have to understand how to change the oil in the system. Every time you come to click, you will see it. You will open and then you will turn on.
Okay.
And you'll never forget. And it will save your engine. If you keep using this and anything happens to this engine due to oiling and the oil level is correct, it's very important. That's why you really have to make sure you explain to him properly how the oil is changed, because he can easily put less oil
Okay.
if he doesn't follow the proper procedure.
Okay.
Okay? If you do that, there is no way the engine will fail at rev limiter 7,000 RPM, which this engine now is capable of doing, because your old push rods were the long length. I don't know what the hell that guy did. He was with the grinder, shaving it. Now the push rods are the correct length. So you can go up to 7,000 RPM. With this system, 7,000 RPM, you don't have an issue.
Okay.
If you do not use this system, I recommend 5,000 RPM rev limiter, not more. Because more than 5,000, you will drain the oil in the oil pan.
Okay.
So since we have this out, I think it's best that right now we explain to him how to do this. Because since it's outside, he understands what it's doing. And I think he understood the
battery.
It's very simple. It's just the battery and two lines,
lines,
two
yes.
power wires, big ones, preferably at least as this big, which is like,
Yeah.
I think it's a 3 gauge. Coming up, just power and ground to that. And then this connects in the same way over there.
Okay.
Okay, and tomorrow we just need to install this,
Yeah.
finish the lines over here, the power steering lines also for the cooler. We attach this and then we can put the engine up. And we remove the fuel tank, the stock one. Your first gear can go up to 80 kilometers an hour. Your second gear goes to 116.
Okay.
And your third gear, 179.
Okay.
Now, 80 is too short. So you're going to be between second and third always.
Yeah.
So now I'll go to my gear ratios so that you see I have them all saved. This is for my 350.
Okay.
So let's see, this is 335, 353, 39, 408, 436. So let's go to the shortest one.
Yeah.
On the shortest one, I have 88, 123, 159.
Okay.
And you have 80, 116. Let's see, 116, I have 123.
Okay.
Okay. And third is 169. And this is 159.
Yeah.
So right now, this is a little bit long.
Yeah.
Okay, a little bit long. So,
Okay, guys, so day one is over. We started early today. It's been like 12 hours straight, one shot. And we're trying to get things done as fast as possible. Adeel mechanic was with me all day, so he learned every step out of the way. So let me show you exactly what we did today and what was our plan. So the first thing we did was, this is the engine that we built in UAE and sent over here. So what we had to do is, there was a few components that were still over here. So we had to assemble them. So stuff like the water pump, the alternator, power steering, pulley dampener, the oil pan. There's a special oil pan that you have to use when you're swapping an LS into this chassis. So the oil pan, the engine mounts, and then putting all the stuff like the coils, the spark plugs, the headers, coil pack wires, and then putting in the main wiring stuff. I know it looks like a mess right now, but these things, they're all gonna be routed into the car. So you'll see that beauty underneath. Only the engine's gonna be popping out. So the stuff that we have on this engine are very simple. The modifications are, there are aftermarket head cylinders on this car that flow 260 cc's. And then we have a mild to an aggressive cam from Texas Speed on the engine, aftermarket push rods, lifters, and rocker arms. And that will control our valve train, because this baby is going to be shifting all the way at 7,000 RPM. And then to top it off, we need a good flowing intake. So we're using the fast LSXR 102 throttle intake with a 102 throttle body from Nick Williams. A very nice unit over here. And then the piece up front is an electric water pump. So usually in rear mounted radiators, what people do is they run the mechanical pump up front, or they delete it, and then they run an electric pump somewhere along the system. But what I like to do is simplify stuff. I like to run an electric pump that sits in the location of the stock pump, and it's powered with a simple 14 volts, and has an inlet and an outlet just like the stock pump. Everything sits in the stock location. Nothing gets altered over there. But it's on a switch, it's reliable. I've been using a similar pump for like 3 years, never had an issue with it, and they flow amazing. They outflow the stock pump. The nice feature about it is, when you switch off the car and you want to keep it cooling, you can turn on the pump because it's electric, and you can turn on your fans, and you can cool down the engine a lot faster than if it was actually on. Then we went on to setting up the main oil lines that go from the oil pan to your remote oil filter, which is mounted underneath on the block, and then from the oil filter up to your oil cooler, and in preparation for your aquasump. So this is the aquasump line, which I'll talk about in a second. We also did all the fuel related items on the engine. So there are some aftermarket injectors on this, with AN fittings all around. We're using Dash 8 fuel lines going all the way back to the fuel system, to the fuel tank. The reason why we went with a Dash 8 instead of like a 4 or a 6, so stock you'll have something like 4. Good upgrade would be 6 for a naturally aspirated. Pretty much 6 is enough for any application. But in our case, we went with 8 just in case Adeel decides down the line to boost this engine, probably going with a supercharger or a turbocharger. He'll have the fuel system to back it up. We'll just have to add another fuel pump if he wants to do that down the line. Then on from there, we added the engine wiring harness, the one that was available over here. We will be changing this to something a lot better. But for the meantime, this will be enough to just start the car and make sure everything's fine. We did a few changes to the firewall up front over here to make space for the water lines that would be coming from the back. We also got the clutch mounted on, which is a twin plate tilt-in clutch. Very nice unit, lightweight, and bolted up the TR6060 transmission out of a Camaro SS. These transmissions are rated to handle around 700 wheel. They're not the nicest thing to drive when you're at 700 wheel, but for something like this, which will be roughly around 550-ish to the wheels, so crank it would be somewhere around 650. These engines are capable of doing a lot of power because they have a big cubic inch displacement. It's a 6.2 liter engine, and it still has more in it if you do a bit more modifications. But for now, this is going to be a reliable setup. Yep, so that's what we got done with today. Tomorrow we'll be on to doing everything in the rear, such as the radiator, fuel system, and mounting the radiator in place and mounting the aquasump actuator in place. So we'll show you that later on tomorrow.
Alright guys, आपने देखा होगा नासिर का एक बड़ा ब्रीफ इंट्रोडक्शन था और उसने आप लोगों को बहुत कोर चीज़ें बताई हैं। और हमने क्या किया है इस व्लॉग में, हमने इंजन को गियर के साथ माउंट करके क्लच प्लेट और ये सब करके क्विक जो इसका रिलीज बेयरिंग था वो सब की सेटिंग करके हमने इंजन को माउंट कर दिया गाड़ी में। तो अब हमारा जो नेक्स्ट स्टेप है जो हम इसके बाद करने जा रहे हैं वो मैं आप लोगों को अगले व्लॉग में दिखाऊंगा। अभी आप मुझे इजाज़त दें और दोबारा कहूँगा सब्सक्राइब करें हमारा यूट्यूब चैनल और इंस्टाग्राम फॉलो करें और टिकटॉक फॉलो करें। और अगर आप चाहते हैं कि आपको बिल्कुल कोर वीडियोस और स्टोरीज मिले जो हम जिस वक्त कर रहे होते हैं उसी वक्त देखनी है अगर आपको, तो आपको हमें सब्सक्राइब करना होगा इंस्टाग्राम पे भी, ताकि आप जिस वक्त जो चीज़ कर रहे होते हैं वो लाइव आप देख सकें। उसके अलावा भी इसमें कुछ बेनिफिट्स हैं, जैसे कि पैसेंजर राइड है, उसके अलावा उसमें हमारी जो शर्ट्स आ रही हैं वो हैं। तो वो सब चीज़ें आप उसमें खुद जाके देखें, आपको पता चलेगा कि उसमें क्या बेनिफिट्स हैं। तो आप लोग हमें सब्सक्राइब करें और टिल देन अभी हमें अगले व्लॉग के लिए इजाज़त दें। तो अभी के लिए इजाज़त, गुड नाइट।